right now on Indianapolis This Week.
Can you respond to that?
Oh, I most definitely can respond to that.
A Sunday morning exclusive. I sit down one-on-one with State School Superintendent Glenda Ritz for her first in-depth interview about the fight over control of education policy.
You know, takeover equals misunderstanding? No. It's very clear about some things that are happening.
Plus, we're joined by a member of the state school board. And our political insiders talk about what happens now for your child's education.
From RTV6, the Indy Channel, this is Indianapolis This Week with Rafael Sanchez.
Good morning. This past week was full of fireworks between the state school superintendent Glenda Ritz and the State Board of Education. Now, Ritz says she did not walk out, but instead adjourned the State Board of Education meeting on Wednesday. She says she did it because she won't allow any attempt to weaken the role or the authority of the Department of Education. I sat down with the superintendent to discuss teacher compensation, the A through F grading process, her big plan for 2014, and the latest controversy. Did you walk out?
No. I adjourned the meeting, and I also had other obligations after the meeting, but after the adjournment of the meeting, typically, you know, you leave. So that's what I did.
Any regrets about the way you adjourned the meeting?
No, there's no regrets about me adjourning the meeting. The members of the board, several members of the board, were not allowing the agenda to continue, and so I didn't have any choice at some point other than to adjourn the meeting because I couldn't progress the agenda. I asked several times to go on to the next item and to the next item and to the next item. I also spent quite a bit of time trying to mitigate the circumstance that we were involved in to begin with the improper motion. When I ruled, I tried to have dialogue prior to that, talking about why it was going to be an improper motion. I had dialogue the day before with the actual maker of the motion, letting him know that it was an improper motion. And by the way, an improper motion is one that actually violates statute. And so I tried to table it. Didn't get a second, so I did rule it improper and asked to continue on with the agenda. So I felt I had no choice, since it wasn't being allowed to continue the agenda, but to adjourn.
Do you feel under siege? Do you feel that every time you propose something, or that you make a statement, or that you want to make a rule, that someone is saying, no, she's the Democrat, we're not going to allow her to do anything she wants to do, we're just going to stop her? It just seems to me that you feel that are you under siege, or do you feel under siege? And if you are, who's the enemy here?
The only conflict that I feel is going on is the conflict with the new agency that the governor has created, the Center for Education and Career Innovation. Since the creation of that agency, the staff who are working with the State Board of Education underneath that agency spend their time undermining what's going on and happening over here at the Department of Education, literally. And it's interfering with what's happening at the board. The board members, look to their CECI staff to give them guidance on how they're to vote, how they're to operate, how it's supposed to be, the wording of a resolution. It's the CECI staff, since that agency has been formed, I feel that that's where the conflict lies. I don't personally have conflict with the board members because, quite frankly, they're all qualified individuals with good experience in education. And we have made decisions every single board meeting that I feel are good decisions.
You also have not been shy. If you believe that the rules are being broken, I mean, you proposed a lawsuit. You've gone after your very board members if you believe something is wrong.
I will not operate in a manner in which we're breaking law. I will not do it. When I felt Open Door was totally being violated, that was beyond my belief. And I was like, no, I cannot allow this. Yesterday, with the improper motion, that clearly in statute gives the right to the department to review the standards. And when it was proposed that the CECI staff actually oversee that entire process, that's not according to law. And so I won't operate in that kind of atmosphere. And so, yes, I'm very firm about that. I'm a person who really wants things to happen like they should, and I don't shy away from that.
The governor issued a statement saying that this was a misunderstanding, that he wants to work with you, that when it comes to education, he also went on to say that it's a shared responsibility. Do you believe that this is all a misunderstanding, and do you see this being as a shared responsibility with the governor's office?
Well, my letter to the editor used the word takeover.
You were strong again. You were very clear.
I am very clear. I gave 4 points that is very clear about how this is happening. Yesterday's.
And you don't back away from your points.
I do not. Yesterday's was the same. Just one more indication where the CECI is taking over responsibility for the Department of Education, of which I have been elected to oversee, and I am not going to shy away from that. I kind of look at this whole situation. Takeover equals misunderstanding? No. It's very clear about some things that are happening from the CECI with my agency. It feels, it looks, there's proof that his agency is overseeing my agency, and I'm the only education agency that should be in force working with all of the schools and making sure that policy is enacted. That's what I was elected to do. I'm a constitutional officer. People. Yes, a great many people who are actually staying involved, Rafael, to be sure that we head in a direction that they voted me in to do.
How do you respond to the criticism from the other side of the aisle that says that you're really getting in the way, that you don't really want to see the letter grades right now, that you're slowing down that process, that Glenda Ritz really didn't want to, she was holding back the letter grades and the entire process? You've heard that criticism. Can you respond to that?
Oh, I most definitely can respond to that. First of all, I'm a teacher, and I am very aware that in Indiana, the high stakes of this test and getting information out is teacher compensation. Literally. Teachers are waiting on compensation, additional compensation, if they're an effective and a highly effective teacher. And it's based in part upon those accountability grades. I have done everything in my utmost power to release these grades as soon as I can release them. But I have a process that needs to be followed. And we have to be sure that everything is complete. So we are doing that. We're releasing the grades on November 15th. And I had told the board that I felt we should be releasing them before Thanksgiving, and we were going about our business to get that done. We are releasing it on the 15th of November, and then the appeals process will begin to make sure that there are no, to correct any kind of errors that the schools might see from their end, and double check everything. So no one wants to get those grades out quicker than I do, because I know educator compensation is based on them now. 2014,
in the legislature, what would you like to accomplish?
Really, I hope it's a quiet session, because we have a lot of things.
It's not going to be a quiet session.
I know, but we have a lot of things that are going on.
Sure.
We're reviewing standards. We have assessments to review. We've got the accountability piece. We have a lot of things that we just kind of need to get where they need to be. But there is one huge issue that we are going to, and actually it's a big initiative, and it's early childhood. And I'm hoping that early childhood legislation is going to be the top of what we talk about this time. On both sides. Yes, but we are one of 16 states, I believe it is, that have applied for a race to the top of the federal government on an early childhood. And I thank Governor Pence for signing that to actually apply and make that happen. We're working with 3 different agencies, the Health Agency and the Family Services agencies, to actually coordinate services for preschool. So I'm hoping that we're going to hear about that and get some really good backing to make that go. So I'm hoping, and despite that, even if we lose, we've got a good framework that we can talk about and move forward with. So we definitely got to get kindergarten totally established. The state of Indiana needs to get that done.
Governor Mike Pence issued a response this week to defend his appointing of the new CECI Council. In it, he calls education in Indiana, as you heard, a shared responsibility. He goes on to say, I take my responsibility to continue the progress we have made in our schools very seriously. You can read the governor's full text of his letter online at our website, theindychannel.com. And those letter grades sent to the schools on Friday are for their internal use only. The official new letter grades will be issued next fall. After the break, we'll be joined by a member of the State School Board of Education for his take on the friction between the board and the superintendent. You're watching Indianapolis This Week. There are two sides to every story, and that definitely is the case in this battle for control over Indiana's education system. Joining us now is State Board member Dr. Brad Oliver. He represents the 6th Congressional District on the board. He's the Associate Dean of Indiana Wesleyan University's School of Educational Leadership, and it was Dr. Oliver's resolution that pushed Superintendent Ritz to adjourn this week's meeting. So what happened?
Thanks, Rafael. Well, as you know, for some time, the board has been working towards several big issues. One of those is the adoption of college and career-ready standards. That was created by legislation in the General Assembly. We refer to it as House Enrolled Act 1427 that stipulates some specific things that the board has to do statutorily. One of those is to evaluate the 2010 Common Core standards that were adopted, and then also to adopt new college and career readiness standards by July 1st. For some time, as far back as August, I'd actually joined the board in July. I've been trying to get information around how we're going to approach that task. Did not receive responses to emails. We got a little further into my tenure, which was only about 2 or 3 meetings before there was a misunderstanding that led to Superintendent Glitz filing a lawsuit against the rest of the board, and that completely shut down communication. And it was about November the 2nd I got a call from Superintendent Ritz to actually start talking about that process. And this is an important part to understand. The standards adoption is critical because the standards are foundational to everything we do in teaching and learning. They will ultimately set the course of the state assessment that we use to measure learning against those standards. It will ultimately result in us collecting information that tells us about the efficacy of teachers and even A to F considerations. So not being able to get that information was difficult, and so I actually decided to put a resolution together. We'd had a meeting on November the 8th. Superintendent Ritz allowed it on the agenda, but time ran short. And during the public meeting on November the 8th, I specifically asked if I could work with board staff to construct a resolution and bring it back on the 13th. And I was given that permission in the public meeting. I did that over the weekend. I took my petition to Superintendent Ritz and the full board. I was asked to come in and meet with department staff on the 12th, and I did that to understand their approach to standard review. And then on the 13th, when we had the meeting, when I brought the motion forward, that was the first time I heard that it was an improper motion.
You are one of 10. Can you folks work together at all? You've been the target of a lawsuit which was dropped. Earlier in the week, there was an adjournment of your meeting and brought things to a standstill. Can you work together?
Yeah, I believe we can, but we're going to have to do a couple things. One is we're going to have to get clarification around the meeting procedures. When I came on the board in July, I was handed a set of meeting procedures that were adopted by the board in May and told that that's what we were going to follow in terms of the decorum of our meeting, how we put agenda items on the meeting. And it's been my observation that since I've come on the board that we have not followed those meeting procedures.
What do you blame for that? What do you blame for that?
Well, there's been no communication. It's been very difficult. I've seen multiple board members ask, and the meeting procedures say that 3 board members request the same agenda item. It's to be an agenda item, but Superintendent Ritz has claimed, in my opinion, powers that are not enumerated to her statutorily as the chair of the board. And I do feel for her because, in one hand, she is the state chief school officer and she runs the Department of Education. But Superintendent Ritz is also the 11th member of the board and the chair of the board, and we share equally in board governance. And I think that's where the tension lies. And when we don't have clear meeting procedures, you get a situation like we did. And that's what happened. When the motion was ruled improper, a number of my colleagues rejected that concept that it was improper because it had been appropriately published. It was advertised by the department. It went through, as far as we knew, everything that she had asked us to do, including a meeting with her staff the day before. And so for her to go through that and then tell us it was improper, the board felt like they were being basically disregarded in their right as they felt to be able to vote on that motion.
You received a letter from the governor on Friday. I want to share that with our audience. On Friday, Governor Pence announced he is reaching out to the National Association of State Boards of Education to clear up any issues on the procedures of the state board. In an open letter to members of the board and to the superintendent, the governor writes, "I know you share my belief that it's of the utmost importance to Indiana school children that the differences that have emerged between the superintendent and other members of the board be resolved in a civil and respectful way to restore a spirit of cooperation and trust." In many regards, the governor is saying, look, I've called these folks, I'm calling them in, will you take me up on my offer? I want to sort of help you mediate your differences. Will you take the governor up on this offer?
Absolutely. I think it was a great move on Governor Pence's part, and we absolutely need that. I've actually called in public meetings myself that we need some kind of a retreat. We need to work. If a third party helps us, we need that. I've been a school administrator for years. I've worked with 2 different school boards. I've been privilege to be in central office as an assistant superintendent. I can tell you that there are two things that are critical. You have to have clear meeting procedures, and you got to be able to build relationships, and we don't have either right now. We've got to be able to work on both.
Do you see any signs that the governor's new agency is in any way trying to overtake the Department of Education?
I've not seen that, but I have seen a lot of confusion, and I think it stems back around where do the responsibilities of the department lie as an agency that's responsible for enforcing policy, and the Board of Education, which is a separate entity by statute that's responsible for setting policy. And I think the confusion comes in that the superintendent of public instruction plays a role in both. And on the one hand, she's enforcing policy over at the department. On the other hand, she's joining 10 appointed governor-appointed members of the school board in setting policy. And so I think if NASB can help us that way by helping us clear up roles and responsibilities, that's a great thing.
Dr. Oliver, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Please come back again. I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about education in 2014. Next, we're sitting down with two of our political insiders to talk about the battle over education among state leaders. Joining us now, two of our political insiders, Democrat Kip Tu and the editor of IndyPolitics.org, Abdul Hakim Shabazz. The meltdown involving education leaders, with the superintendent claiming that the governor wants to take over agency. Is there any truth to that?
No. I mean, let me put it this way. As I watched your interview with Glenda Ritz, I had to remind myself this was RTV6 and not Comedy Central. As I sat there and listened to everything she said, the problem with Glenda Ritz is not the State Board of Education. It's not Governor Mike Pence. It's Glenda Ritz. She has consistently missed deadline after deadline after deadline. Board members ask for documents. They ask for information. They never get it. If they do get it, they get it at the last minute. Now, whether it's because they're incompetent or they're sinister, you know, that's yet to be determined. But the problem is not the board. The problem is not the governor. The problem is Glenda.
Election night 2012, my good friend here, Abdul, basically telegraphed what was going to happen. He said, you know what, it's fine that she got elected in 2012, but she's basically going to be a piece of furniture because we're going to run right over her. That's pretty much a quote, and that's exactly what has occurred since that point. The governor has created a shadow agency that he's trying to move all of the responsibilities of the state of her office into this office because they are trying to run roughshod over. They are trying to ignore the election results of 2012, and I think they're doing it at their own peril.
But she's fighting back. Do you think they expected just a sweet librarian to take the office and do nothing? She has sued. The lawsuit was dropped. She has adjourned meetings to try to stop something. She is trying to do something. But
yeah, well, some of us would call that a walkout, not an adjournment, but that's sometimes what my Democrat friends like to do when they don't want to stay and argue things on the merit. I mean, it would be one thing if Glenda Ritz was actually trying to...
Would she pay a price for that? Because the last time we had...
Arguing on the merit, she said, I'm going to take it to the Attorney General. I mean, if you watch the tape, which I did watch, she said repeatedly, I believe that we ought to have your guy's lawyer thinks this is okay. My lawyer thinks it's not okay. I'm going to take it to the Attorney General. We can bring it back to the next meeting. But they continued to push because they have an agenda, and their agenda is to take over her department. You're the one who said it was going to happen. Now you're acting like it wasn't. No,
if this was such a problem, let's just like.
Did you not say that election night?
What I said.
Did you not say election night?
Probably what I said was that. What I said was that reform is not going to stop. Reform is going to keep going forward, more likely.
We'll get the tape for that.
No, but at the end of the day, I mean, if everybody's against Glenda, then the very least thing Glenda should do is make a vague attempt to do her job. Why would she give Republicans all this cover?
They're doing their job, and in fact, for the first hour of the meeting, they agreed on the A through F standards. She's obviously doing her job.
After spending 15 minutes fighting over the minutes of the last meeting.
Well, the last meeting was pretty darn contentious.
Let me ask you this. Obviously, she has a term to fulfill, but is this time to discuss the issue that position should be maybe appointed by future governors, since more than 50% of the state budget has to do with education, and the governor, to some extent, is held accountable for education? Is this the time to discuss that, or is it too early?
Well, the voters were pretty clear, I think, in 2012 that they wanted a slowdown, that they weren't happy with what Tony Bennett had done as the head of that department. So you can certainly make the argument that the voters of the state of Indiana want to keep this thing in an elected position because they made a pretty clear statement when she won that election. And what the Republicans have done and what Abdul predicted would happen is they're going to try to run roughshod over her. And that's exactly what they've been doing for the last 11 months.
He's quoted you something.
I know, exactly. in 2004, both the Democratic state platform and the Republican state platform both called for an appointed superintendent public instruction. And in this situation, it's clearly demonstration. Take the fight, have it at the governor's office, win the governor's office, and then you dictate policy. Because this back and forth, even though I think Ritz is wrong, this isn't healthy for anybody.
The governor did send a letter to all parties on Friday saying, hey, let me help you mediate. Come on, I'm going to call in this group.
As if he has nothing to do with anything.
Will that work? Will we see any resolution to this?
It was really transparent, I thought, a transparent attempt to say, hey, it wasn't me, even though I appointed every member of the board and they're doing exactly what my newly created agency wants them to do. It isn't me. I'm trying to be the arbitrator here. I think it's pretty transparent, and I don't think it makes any difference.
Just like marriage counseling, mediation only works if both parties want it to work. I think the governor and the state board do. I think Linda wants to go mess around and do something.
They're okay mediating as long as she capitulates to everything they want to do.
Last word.
Well, she doesn't have to capitulate. She just do her job.
She is doing her job.
If she did her job, we wouldn't be here right now. Her job is not to walk out. I thought she was heading off to Illinois when she left the meeting.
A lot of love on this Sunday. They're going to get some counseling. The conversation between our insiders continues on Twitter. Check out their Twitter handles and give us your opinion and stay up with Kip, Abdul, Laura, Jennifer throughout the week. Indianapolis This Week continues after the break.
Good morning, I'm Jade Hindman. Here's what's making news on RTV6 this morning. We have wet weather outside now, but our Storm Team 6 meteorologists say rain showers could turn severe later today. This morning, so much rain fell, it pooled up on roads, even closing a portion of Keystone Avenue on the north side. Keystone Ave has since been reopened and is passable at the moment. Again, we do have a threat of severe weather, though, for later in the day. And this morning, storms are also being blamed for an overnight fire. Crews say lightning may have sparked flames at a home on the north side. A couple heard a loud sound of thunder at their home in the 9600 block of Winsome Court near 82nd Street. Firefighters tell us a few minutes later, smoke detectors went off and the couple saw flames in the basement. Fire crews spent 40 minutes during the downpour putting out that fire. And remember, we have breaking news and weather updated all day long on the IndyChannel.com. We now go back to Rafael Sanchez in Indianapolis This Week.
We are continuing to follow the chances of severe weather here at RTV6 today. For the latest forecast, local radar, and weather alerts to be sent straight to your smartphone, be sure to download the Storm Shield app. You can use iTunes, Google Play, or check out the links online at theindychannel.com. A Storm Team 6 meteorologist, Kyle Mounts, will be tracking any severe weather in our area tonight on RTV6 News at 6 and 11. And thanks for joining us for this edition of Indianapolis This Week. I'm Rafael Sanchez. Have a great and safe Sunday.